we're presented with yet another fascinating musical and aesthetic endeavor, uh, Jessie, that you've offered us, and I'm always humbled to join you in conversation about your work and your vision here. And what a group to be partnered with. And so I want to just start. What were those conversations like in the beginning? How did you get in touch with the orchestra? Um, how do you find yourself, inspired by the legacy of Sun Ra and his orchestra? And where do you perhaps diverge or build off of that tradition?
Yeah, thank you so much, Isaac, for doing the interview with me, and I'm always grateful to get to have you be part of projects. And yes, the orchestra is one of my biggest influences as a thinker, as an artist, and for life. So to work with them is kind of mind blowing. And yeah, it started actually because for somehow by chance what happened is that we invited them to the Columbia Composers Series, which was quite an incredible opportunity as well that happened. And after that, I wanted to continue or try to continue working with them and see what was possible. So I asked them to whether they would be interested to apply for the uh, from commission at Harvard. And they said yes, they would love to work with me. So I was very excited about that. And then the prize came through, and now we're in this exciting situation that I can
Right.
create this concert with them. Yeah. And yeah, actually, the concert is a celebration also or the piece and the concert is a celebration of their legacy and of what they kind of gave me, and what
Mm,
they kind of give us in the world as a way of approaching life and thinking life as,
mm,
and how they did that through music. It's very much uh, important to me to celebrate that and to be able to try at least to continue this sort of legacy forward, like in terms of like creating a space where this can be further disseminated or discovered again. And so the
mm,
whole concert is actually like the story of me finding or discovering the orchestra, and then
mm,
they take me and also the audience, of course, onto a certain outer space travel. And this travel is then sort of like, maybe we could call that a celebration. But yeah, the searching for the orchestra and what, yeah, and then finding them and gaining this technology of space travel, outer space travel, is what the piece is about. And yeah.
travel and outer space, not here, has been always a feature of your practice, and I would say your theoretical practice, your compositional practice, and you're also all over the world all the time. So I think in your embodied experience as
Yeah.
well. And so I wonder if you could say a little bit more about, before we get to a deep dive into the piece, a little bit more about how you read Sun Ra's, you know, space travel within his work, and how you see that in community or in tension with your space travel in your work, which is also very digitally based. It's also engaging online platforms and different technologies that immerse the listener in a kind of virtual experience as well.
Yeah, totally. So um so Sun Ra, actually, there's a couple of places where he mentions this just very explicitly. Um, when he's talking about space travel, he's thinking about a refiguring of this world that we're in, or the planet that we're on. And to, for example, one way he would say to think this planet as a spaceship, that we're actually
Mm.
in a spaceship right now and we're traveling the universe or the cosmos. So the whole space travel work is actually also an attempt to refigure and rethink how we live on this planet and with each other and with this planet and with the cosmos. And that whole task actually for the Sun Ra Arkestra is one that engages Blackness as something that really engages Blackness in a way where maybe now we could say theoretically it's being more elaborated in terms of Black studies and so forth, but where we really go and embrace and celebrate this out of placeness that is always put onto Black bodies and people and things. So I think for me, it's true that it's always also like my life experience, and that has always been so, right? So to be kind of like a space traveler, even when I'm just here, that is to say that my very existence is a multiple spaces meeting in my way of thinking. So the traveling itself is like I'm a spaceship too, not just the planet. And maybe Sun Ra hinted to that, with his and the orchestra, with their practice, and we can further elaborate on it and think it. But to me, that is why I think is such important messages in their work that we can keep celebrating and that we can keep learning from, especially also in our time that it's still very relevant and useful and helpful and important. So yeah, for me, that's just how I try to keep thinking with the traveling instead of trying to claim spaces as my own or something like that. So that's what I think how the space travel affords as a way of living, you could say.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, of course, I'm always thinking about the piece that you made that drew us into different worlds, and how sounds themselves get their own world. And so it's really curious now to imagine how that plan and that map of travel is going to work alongside. For me, really, Sun Ra and company are the folks that make us dream about the worlds that sound. But I would love to think more closely now with the piece. And I even saw in the notes for the instrumentation that there are holes made in the drums. The percussive phrases are, I guess, interrupted or disturbed by strings that are strung through holes. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this stage setup, which I imagine the listeners will be able to see the diagram that you have.
Yes.
Will that be available to them?
I'm not sure about that plot, but they will see it, I guess, in the space. So yeah,
Right.
I have drums distributed over the whole stage, and they have small strings attached to them, and then they lead to one place where I bow cymbals, and then I touch the strings with the cymbals with the strings, the strings with the cymbals, whatever. And then the sound travels on the string to the drum, and then sounds. So this kind of dislocalizes or multilocalizes or hyperlocalizes the sound of the cymbal. And of course, then you can kind of imagine that sound can become firstly a spatialized, but then also sounds of the cymbals become spaces, and that's then further amplified this idea or this making, in that I actually created a universe, a score that's a universe or a cosmos that can be traveled, and those each planet in that cosmos corresponds to a different set of symbols with drums. So you can, of course, place a different symbol and connect it to a different drum. So that's one, or the combination thereof then creates different options, right? So,
and how many cymbals and how many drums are there?
Have 4 drums distributed, plus a extra drum that's a moon, and then I have 4 cymbals. So there's not all combinations, but there are multiple combinations that I use to then make planets, and that, yeah. So that's the stage setup. Yeah, kind of to allow us to travel spaceways. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I'm of course thinking back to your provocatively titled Cyborg Clarinet. And I want to think back to that, which makes me think about, the life of the machine, the life of the instrument, as it is animated by the instrumentalist or vice versa. Can you just say a little bit about what it is like to manipulate the authorized, to manipulate the given, to manipulate the instrument as it is normatively present in the world with this, and my work on skin and the psychoanalytic dimensions of skin, how the body is porous, and now here you are saying, I'm going to jab holes into this taut surface of the percussive elements of the work, and in kind of disturbing this and destroying the order of a enclosed skin, you're making new connections, and you keep saying that they're in this work of being spatialized and the sounds becoming spaces themselves. You're saying that there's all of these multiple combinations that can be made. So what is it like to manipulate the instruments?
Yeah. Thanks for the wonderful question. Actually, so the skin, the idea of a skin as a separation breaks down in my work and has to be forgotten. And has to maybe we have to rethink it. We must maybe say, maybe you can call it a drummer's way of rethinking, or maybe you can think about it also in terms of so for example, when I think about jabbing the hole, I'm not really making a hole. I'm in my mind of thinking it, because what it's doing is it's vibrating skin, and the skin vibrates whether I put a string on it or my hand, or I sing at it, or I scream at it. So the skin is not a limiter, but rather is catalyst. Maybe that's maybe a Sun Ra word to use here. But the skin, it's catalyzing, right? It's what gives the sound energy, and the drum is what gives the sound energy, and it is the sound, right? Because the sound of the music in this piece, as in those other pieces, and in my cyber clarinet, is the space interacting with things in the space. That is this relation. Maybe we could call it almost ecological, but it's maybe a return to thinking the planet together with the things on the planet and so forth. So that there is not like, okay, here is a drum and here is a string and here is a cymbal, but rather it's kind of like music, like frequencies that bounce off of each other and are frequencies only because they bounce off of each other. That's the only way they can exist. And so this is actually, the cyber clarinet is kind of related to the opening, maybe we can call it scene of this piece, where I play where I have a contrabass flute solo, dedicated to Charles Usor, to specifically his piece for George Floyd, 846. So it's a dedication to a dedication. And it's the whole piece is about, it's basically breathing and making spaces. And the flute is like a co-space maker with the flutist, so that you don't know where the body begins or ends. And the breathing is the exchange of these bodies. So this to me is like saying we have to enter the door of no return or go into the outer darkness, or it's after the end of the world. As Sun Ra
I'm pulling
says.
up the program.
In
I'm pulling up the program right now to see that end part. Yeah, to see that end part. Sorry for the interruption. We might have a delay here. I don't know if we have a delay.
Yeah. So that is why this piece is the radical refusal to think the end of George Floyd's life, which is the same as to write a piece of music for George Floyd, and the same as to write a piece of music for Charles Usor, who is a Black Swiss composer, and the same as to protest the murder of George Floyd, but also the same as to celebrate his life, and so forth. So that is a refusal to see an individual as self-contained, and as such, it also creates the refusal of the context that made that individual, killed that individual. So that is kind of, to me, the radical practice that the Sun Ra Arkestra has been practicing for so long, a way to kind of really radically change the world on the basis of embracing this darkness and go into the outer spaceways.
What I hear you saying is actually the skin is porous as it is. We know this. There is no real distinction between the thing that affects and the affected, the affected. And I really appreciate the ways in which perhaps your explicit instrumentation in this way of physically connecting the entities, boring holes in a surface that is already filled with holes. There's a kind of I don't know how to explain how I would say it. There's a kind of like a exposure that's happening in your work, which makes me think of, is space here? Is there a kind of traveling that is really on the lower frequencies, a phrase that we borrow often from Ellison? And how does your composition attend to that?
Thank you for leading us here, Isaac. Actually, so the important part also is that this way of working takes serious the context of the world, that is the power dynamics, that is etc. The confusion that you think that you are is just as important. That is to say that space is a complex relation that can only be experienced as space, and the same goes for time. And as such, I'm not interested in reducing it, but I'm interested in the celebration of that which is the dance, maybe we can say, um, between things that space gives space to and things that make space, you see. So we always have to make a space. Like this concept, this piece is making a space for this celebration, for this music, for us to express ourselves. And the same way that Sun Ra Arkestra made a space, like Sun Ra is a corporation and made a space for music, right? And they make a space out of nothings, we could almost say, but it's not nothing in the sense of like a nothing that is sort
Like
of
the material wasn't there. The material
yeah,
is very present.
It's more like a radical refusal of the space that was already there and creating a change so that there's a new space. And this new space, we can play this music and we can express ourselves and we can be Black composers, you know, and so forth. So like that to me is what the orchestra, just like the AACM, for example, as well, and many others, other examples out there, have done and are still doing. And that is laborious, like there's a lot of labor, maybe we could say, that goes into it in terms of refiguring and keep on pushing. So yeah, it took work to connect the dots to write the piece, but as such, it's about space creation as much as it's about travel, in that the travel is also making space. Yeah. Something like that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Travel is about making space, but also I appreciate throughout this entire discussion your emphasis on celebration. And I wonder, in the last couple of minutes that we have, if we could talk about the relationship between celebration and your emphasis, both in the title of the piece, but throughout the practice of composing the piece and insisting upon the impossible. What does it mean to celebrate the impossible? What does it mean to celebrate a refusal to take the terms of events as it's been told, to take the murder of this individual by the state and say, actually, if we think through composition, if we think through music, we can enter into a refusal of those terms and practice another way of thinking after his life. And so that to me sounds like a celebration of life, a celebration of breathing. So again, what do you think about the relationship between celebration and this idea of entering the impossible?
That's a great point. I never thought about that to be related, but that's right. Well, enter impossible, to me, all of this is impossible or used to be impossible, and to see things come to exist like that makes no sense. Like I never would have thought that Sun Ra Arkestra would be invited by Colombian composers, I have to say, or that I would win a from commission to write a piece for them, or that I would even be in New York at Columbia University. I would say maybe, you know, Sun Ra Arkestra, when they started, thought it was impossible to do what they did. And they said, well, we do the impossible. I think pretty sure Sun Ra said that many times. But also for me, it's like, I'm an impossible kind of thing too, in so many ways. And the impossible, yeah, so for me, it's always been about doing the impossible when I do art, because firstly, that's what's fun to me, maybe we could say, but also because I think that's what I'm about in some ways, which is kind of redundant to say, but and then celebration has just been on my mind, I guess, because I want to celebrate the orchestra, and because I want to celebrate as a form of bringing forward that which I think can give people something for their life that maybe we forget or need to remind ourselves of, but also because celebration functions also like refiguring or critique at the same time, in that if we celebrate in that way, like maybe we could call this like a New Orleans type funeral, then as you said, it's also a critique of things that we need to change in the world. And at the same time, it always points us into the impossible in that scene, because it doesn't rest in the critique, but it shows you the critique's own end. And that's the impossible. The impossible is that which you couldn't think, which is not in the context. And the context must then end and change. And that is impossible, because what has been impossible and you couldn't even think, you couldn't even imagine as impossible, suddenly appears in this celebration, maybe you could say. So that's, I guess, my spin on the terms, those two terms. So
And I mean, in
much,
that, no, I hear in that, and I mean, Jessie, this is what your work time and time again does, and I feel so full after this encounter, as you know, as we continue to work together. It's a celebration of the things that couldn't have been thought of until you and your colleagues put them together, but also a legacy of Black radical experimental practitioners to draw from the material that is very present in the world around us, very explicit in the world around us, the drum, the skin, and engage with it in a way, be true to our not estranged relationship with these elements, and celebrate that relationship in a way that attends to the impossible and says, wait, there's actually a relationship here. There's actually a sound that could be made, which was previously unthought of. So I think that that's really, really a testament to your compositional vision, and I'm so thankful for your work.
Well, thank you so much, Isaac, for the kind words and for all your work with me in general, of course, as well. Can't wait to share this piece with more people and
Brilliant.
to experience what will happen with the orchestra when we travel this new spaceways.
Yeah, fantastic.